This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Welcome back, fellow teachers and listeners, and I hope you've had a wonderful, relaxing summer break. I know I have. I'm Sarah Kate Towlson, and you're tuned into Teachers Talk Radio. So tonight we've got an exciting show lined up for you, diving into the challenges and opportunities of effective CPD and how we can get it right. So let's jump right in and make this school year the best one yet.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So, welcome back to all of my followers and friends, and a huge warm welcome to any new listeners this evening. Thank you for the support, and thank you to Teachers Talk Radio again for the opportunity where we can share amongst teachers and have our voice heard. So tonight's show, Getting CPD Right, is really something that's very close to my heart, as are all of the topics that I choose for the shows. It's centered around possibly, I would say, one of my most favorite topics in education and personal pastimes. Call me a geek, but as an educator, professional development to me, anyone who knows me personally or professionally will know this, but is really close to my heart. And it's very common for me to tune into a late night CPD session or read up on the latest educational books or reports, and endeavour in my day-to-day job as a teacher to share great practice with my colleagues and with teaching communities near and afar. For me, CPD as professionals in such a fast-paced, ever-changing career such as teaching that we're in is really a non-negotiable. And as someone who is deeply passionate about developing my own professional practice, I felt I really wanted to use this first show of the new academic year. Welcome back, everybody, although I believe the UK isn't back yet, so do enjoy those last few days of freedom while you can. But I wanted to use this show to really open the floor and to give old and new teachers and leaders their say in their school and their own personal CPD this year. I think it's worth thinking about their experience aside. No matter how long we've been in this trade, we all have that responsibility to continue upskilling ourselves, and I think that goes for every career. It's about refining our practice to better serve the ever-growing learning needs of ourselves as teachers and educators, but also, and the most important people that we're in the job for, of course, for our students. And I cannot encourage you enough to join in tonight on the conversation, ask questions, share ideas, share best practice. This is what it's all about. Share your personal gains in CPD experiences and challenges, of course, that you personally have faced or schools in which you've been part of may have faced. How to do this? Via the call-in or text-in options on the Podbean mobile app. So please do get involved this evening wherever you are. So let's delve in straight away then and begin by setting the CPD scene a little bit in September 2024 as we're in new academic year. As schools face increasing pressures, as we know, left, right and centre, we've got rising expectations, we've got diverse student needs and, of course, ever-evolving teaching methods, which honestly can often be a contradiction, or at least seem like one. For example, use less tech in your teaching. We need to teach our students to write for the exams and to develop fine motor skills that they just don't have the practice of day in, day out in today's society. Versus, we must now embed AI into everyday teaching to meet the technological demands of education and society, as just one example. Getting CPD right, therefore, has never been more important or indeed challenging as well for educators, leaders and for schools. According to recent statistics from January this year, while 9 out of 10 teachers believe they have a clear understanding of their teaching strengths and weaknesses, many still find it challenging to access PD or CPD that truly enhances their practice. In fact, only 4 in 10 teachers found their last inset day somewhat or very useful. And just 4% of us believe that training on, for example, behaviour management would lead to significant improvements in our expertise in the area. Contrasting that, however, now with the amazing shift towards research-informed teaching and learning and the revolution of evidence-based practice. This shift, which I am loving, is encouraging, and I'm enjoying. And it's encouraging us as professionals and teachers to become more curious, more discerning, seeking out research that is relevant, reliable, and also, of course, applicable to our specific context and student needs. Yet this presents new challenges. How do we then close the gap between the theory and the practice? The real great news is that the desire for meaningful professional development remains strong. And I think all of my teacher colleagues on the show now would completely agree with this. Recent survey data also confirms that the top priorities for CPD, interestingly, are at the top spot, number 1, expanding our subject knowledge, and number 2, closely followed by improving classroom instruction. In this episode today, we'll explore how schools can overcome the hurdles of delivering effective CPD that truly makes a difference. Joining me this evening are 2 exceptional leaders in education, both of whom I've had the enormous pleasure of working alongside over the past few years, both in the UK, in my previous school, and here in the UK in the UAE, at present. So we're going to get the conversation started a little bit, because that's enough of me talking, and you really want to hear my guests because they are experts in their fields. Just before we invite our wonderful guests on, again, I want to remind you to comment, please, in the text in, or you can, of course, call in live as well, which would be great to have your views and share your experiences, and, of course, have any questions for myself or our wonderful guests. So, our guests, Dean Williams, first of all, is a wonderful teacher, first and foremost, and is somebody I have the pleasure of working alongside currently in my school. Dean is new to the role this year, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, of assistant head of the primary school. We're working in an international school, in an all-through, which, as you can imagine, is quite a challenge in itself, in an all-through international private school. Now, the reason that I invited Dean to join us on the show tonight is, firstly and foremost, because, as I said, he is a fantastic teacher, and I have witnessed and had the pleasure of witnessing his teaching when I was helping him out with Year 5. He is also so passionate, probably one of the most passionate educators that I've met in terms of taking control of his own CPD, but also trying to build communities and trying to network across local communities as well. In fact, last year he almost single-handedly orchestrated and organised all of the logistics and pulled off this fantastic local education conference, which was just phenomenal. And he's also, and I'm sure he'll tell you all about it later on during the show, but he's completed last year, I believe, his master's in a topic which I believe is really close to our hearts and relevant for this show this evening. My second guest, who again you will hear lots more from in a moment, and she will do a much better job of introducing herself than I'm about to do, is Carol Noble. Carol Noble is currently working as assistant head of teaching and learning in a very different school to the one that Dean is at and myself at the moment. It is, and I'm sure she'll tell you more, an inner city UK public school located in the East Midlands. Now, Carol first introduced me, and this is her claim to fame, to research-led CPD. Up until that point, of course, I'd read books, I'd been in the game 10 years, 11 years at this stage. But Carol, in her role as Assistant Head of Teaching and Learning, really inspired me. She knows her stuff more than probably anybody I've ever met when it comes to teaching and learning and real evidence informed practice. And I'm sure she is going to be an absolute asset to this conversation this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful friends and sponsors at Teachers Talk Radio for some amazing adverts and awesome discounts. So please do stay tuned and listen to the discount codes. And we will re-meet again as I introduce you to our fabulous guests after the short adverts.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Perfect. Thank you so much from our friends and sponsors. Okay, so as we've set the scene with a little bit on the current landscape of CPD in education, we're going to go straight into introducing our guests. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with Carol Noble, and I'm just going to hand it straight over to you, Carol, if that's okay, to do a much better introduction than I did.
Hi, Sarah.
Welcome, Carol.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you for your kind introduction. It's lovely to be on the show and to talk about CPD. I am obviously very passionate about CPD, a similar way to you, and I am very committed to its importance in schools. I think for me, when I discovered the research-led theory and the ideas behind how important it is to support staff and develop staff in exploring these aspects of CPD, it kind of opened a new door for me, particularly with the need for so many staff to explore what they needed for their career. And so having sort of spent a long time in schools with no CPD for myself and very little on offer, this was a new opportunity that I thought was, extremely interesting and allowed so many staff to explore this CPD at a better level, at a level that they needed or that we needed. And so, yeah, I'm really, really excited about this evening's discussion.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carol. And I think anybody listening can hear that passion shining through straight away. And something that I've scribbled down from what you've just said, Carol, is what your staff needed for their career as well, which is something that we'll touch upon later on. Because, of course, we're talking about getting it right. How do we get our CPD right, and how do leaders and schools get it right for everybody, which, of course, is not an easy task. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Dean then to do the grand introduction. So welcome to the show, Dean Williams.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show, Sarah. I'm really excited to chat to yourself and to Carol about all things CPD. as you mentioned, your kind words there when you were introducing me, CPD is something that I have quite a passion for and studied in my master's, sort of the barriers as to why we sometimes do get CPD wrong. So yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting about that and other forms of CPD tonight with you both.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dean. And thank you again for your time, particularly as Dean did tell me earlier, not that I had a clue, of course, that there's a pretty big football game happening right now. So, yes, I'll give him an extra thank you for that as well. Okay, so we're going to go straight in then. I've got lots of questions from guests, from social media in the run-up to the show, and also from myself to pose to our wonderful guests tonight. And again, just a reminder to please text in anything at all that you would like to ask us on the show tonight, or to share your experiences of some of these scenarios. So I'm going to start off then with CPD challenges and potential solutions, hopefully, as well. Now, as I said earlier, it's not a quick win. Creating a culture in a school and leading CPD, which is going to tick boxes for every single member of staff in that school. So my first question, Carol, I'm going to put you on the spot, is what are the specific hurdles that you've encountered in the role that you're in getting all teachers on board and engaged with CPD sessions?
I think you're right in that building the culture is the most important thing, because that's the biggest hurdle I think that you face when delivering whole school CPD, or building a program, or building an attitude towards it. Really, you want staff to trust you. You want staff to feel valued, that their voice is valued, that their opinions matter, and you need staff to feel that you have their best interests at heart. And I think those are the biggest hurdles you'll face with most stuff. It's that buy-in, isn't it? It's staff actually wanting to take part. And so crafting that culture is your first job in any role, I think, in any way of setting the scene for CPD, building those positive relationships with members of staff, making them feel valued, and showing that you are working with them and you want to develop and build your professional repertoire, I suppose, your professional career as well as theirs. It's a joint venture. I think that really, really helps. The other big challenge that we face is time. And it's no surprise, every member of staff in every part of the school, building the school structure, faces that problem, the problem of time. And therefore, you need to make sure that it's a really important aspect of the systems and the structures that are put in place right at the beginning of the academic year, that you've planned time for it, that there's follow-up time, that there's development time, that there's time to change and time to reassess and reevaluate. And that can be done as long as it's thought about carefully and agreed with sort of all stakeholders. This is the time we want to devote, and this is why. And then your final one is obviously the different aspects of people's needs. So what people really need in CPD is very, very different. So to try and meet each of those needs at the same time as managing the development of the school, that's a challenge as well in itself, and that brings other challenges like financial challenges and sort of people pulling in different directions. So that has to be managed as well, and a clear communication is a really effective tool for managing that, and listening to all voices. I think that's another really important aspect, making sure everybody has a voice, everybody can share their point of view before you begin your plan, before you set forth. And again, as you're developing the CPD process, talking to everybody and reevaluating and making sure that those needs are still being met.
Yeah. I mean, as you've just put in a nutshell, Carol, it is so complex, isn't it? You know, it's it's not just an inset day or an inset week. It's that ongoing reflection and follow up and development. You know, it is an annual process, if not, you know, over various years as well, in terms of what the staff need and what your school needs as well. And I love the fact that you talk about trust and value as well, and how embedding that culture at the start of a school year, I would say for new staff and for, you know, staff that have been there for however many years, it is vitally important, because if you haven't got that culture of trust, then, you know, you're not going to get that buy-in from anybody. And the logistics, I mean, we always talk about time, and I kind of giggled to myself I don't know, in a bit of a sigh at the same time. And the time comes up, everything that I seem to do at the moment in terms of, you know, the Teachers Talk Radio or anything else that I'm preparing, every time it's time that comes up as, you know, the problem is that we lack time as teachers, right?
Absolutely. Teachers are incredibly time poor, and therefore getting CPD right is crucial, because you're taking time from them, and you have to know that that time is valuable. And, you know, no one's perfect, we get it wrong, but if you've set that trust and that value at the beginning, and you're very open and transparent, then teachers are incredibly forgiving as well. So it's about building those positive professional relationships right at the start, which is, as I said, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dean, of course, you know, you're working at the moment and leading in a very different context, educational context. So in terms of the challenges of CPD, how would you say your school or your CPD program is tailored to meet the diverse international needs of teachers at that school?
Hi, yeah. So first of all, just to sort of go back to some of the things that Carol and yourself mentioned there, Sarah, with regards to time constraints, it's still the same. The same barriers I feel still crop up, despite the fact we're at an international school. It still is those time constraints that's our main issue that we have. I guess other barriers, first of all, that we could come across in our setting is we're in a school that is running from KG all the way through to year 13. So when it was discussed just a moment ago about the different needs of different teachers, obviously we have foundation stage all the way up to those teachers teaching A-levels, and also specialist teachers such as Arabic and Islamic teachers as well, that we have here in the Middle East. So that certainly is a barrier as well that we need to overcome. With regards to how our school has probably combated a lot of that, I'd like to think that we talk about culture there, and culture within our school is something that is looked upon and is just paramount, really, that positive culture that we have for educators all learning. So we're quite lucky with regards to that. So therefore, with our CPD programs, we've kind of gone down given teachers a lot of autonomy over how they develop themselves through certain pathways, whether that be sort of professional courses themselves. We're very good at offering professional courses to our staff, masters and MPQs, for instance. We have pathways for observations and learning walks, so that therefore teachers actually are opting into that. So by opting into sort of a pathway of observations and learning walks, you know that the teachers that you have in that pathway want to be observed, want to learn from their colleagues. We also have an action research pathway as well. So again, sort of looking down the academic route. I know earlier you just mentioned evidence-based practices. something that goes very far in our school, and I would like to think a lot of the decisions that are made are because our colleagues are so well read with regards to current educational evidence-based practices. And you mentioned there as well, the conference that we had set up in the UAE, where I think it was close to 700 people attended. So we really do have within the community here in the UAE a lot of professionals who want to take time out, even on we mentioned time constraints. We're going to courses on a Saturday morning and conferences on a Saturday morning. So I think that culture out here is definitely embedded in something that really helps us at the school that we're at.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think that in terms of creating that culture, you are also relying on staff to do their bit outside of these classic inset days or scheduled CPD time, because as you've both mentioned, there simply isn't enough time to do everything in a school calendar. And of course CPD is vitally important for staff, for the school and for the students, but when you've only got, let's say, a couple of sessions a term and an inset week, it's really about, as you both said amazingly, it's prioritizing what your staff need on an individual basis as well. Logistically, sometimes I'm sure that leaders can find that quite impossible. I think the pathways, Dean, that you've mentioned is perhaps a good way in terms of personalising that journey, that CPD journey as well. But you are, I think I've certainly felt in my career, in a good way, and this isn't me complaining because I love to do it in my free time, but there is that reliance on an expectation to a certain degree, without putting it in writing, that teachers will invest time, their own time, in their career progression, which is great, and I'm all for that. Something that I wanted to mention as well, and this is a classic, and I'm sure Dean and Carol and everybody else listening will agree. How do you move CPD? So once you've scheduled it onto your school calendars, once you've tried to put as much time aside for it as we can do as teachers in education at the moment, how do you move from that inspiration stage, I'm going to call it, which might take the form of, let's say, a really dynamic inset session that Carol's run, or a conference that Dean's organised on this particular Saturday in February, and how do you move staff from that inspiration wow factor of somebody coming in or somebody in the school delivering this amazing CPD to then following that up with practice in the classroom? How do we get from inspiration to implementation then?
I think, again, when you're planning for your CPD, you have to plan for the implementation as well. You can't just have a standalone session planned and think that's going to work. We know that actually staff need a significant amount of time on one topic, one idea, at least 2/3 of an academic year, if not a whole academic year, exploring a topic or an idea or a concept. I think, therefore, if you sort of set out that plan and that time for staff at the beginning, they can see the opportunities that lie ahead of them. One of the things that we do is we build, if it's whole school CPD, we then build in department time as well. So there is a specific department meeting that's calendared to follow up from the inset or the whole school teaching and learning CPD that we've delivered. And then from there, there's further time for them to observe each other, for staff to share and to be coached. And this academic year, we're developing small sort of expertise groups to support and develop with each other, and move into more of a coaching style so they can examine each other's work and share ideas. And I think that allows staff to see that you're not just dropping something on them, it's about proper investment in them. I also think giving staff a voice during that process is also really important. I spend quite a lot of time talking to members of staff, sharing ideas, getting them to feedback regularly on evaluation forms and what they want to see in the future, what aspects of the CPD work they thought were effective, what aspects they want to develop more, or they want more input from or about. I also, as I said earlier, that communication is really, really important, that you build that throughout the process of the plan. I've recently, I don't know if you're familiar with the EEF's implementation training that they've recently been delivering. So I was part of that. I explored that concept, and their idea of implementation is that it's that process. It's not about here's an idea, deliver it, finish. It's about a circular concept that we're developing, that sort of research, plan, do, evaluate, check, and then act again. It's a complete circle in terms of how it's going, the impact it's having, and how staff feel. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you there, Sarah. It's not, you can't just have a one-off, here we go, here's a great session, off you go, we're done, because that's just not going to develop anybody at all, I don't think.
And it's again going back to time, but in the classroom as a teacher, you know, when you've had this wonderful CPD and these opportunities to collaborate and work with, as you said, Carol, you know, so important when you've had a whole school session to then have the time and the opportunity to, you know, do debriefs and more sort of subject specific training in your departments as well. And as I said in my introduction to the show, really interesting that has come out as the top priority in a recent survey. The expanding subject knowledge is what teachers really want, first and foremost, from their CPD. And the follow-up sessions, as I said, are so vital in that and embedding that time. And you mentioned as well, Carol, you know, the full circle, the cycle, the classic CPD cycle. And, you know, we've all heard about it, we all read about it, but it is difficult if you've not, as you said, planned in advance for that, to find that time and that opportunity for teachers to practice, to put it into implementation stages in their classroom and to then evaluate it, which again is of course part of, you know, our performance management cycles as well. You mentioned, Carol, the EEF and the Great Teacher Toolkit. This is not scripted at all, but I just thought about this. I'm interested, Dean, you might know the answer to this as well, but how does a school go about selecting a particular framework for staff in terms of teaching and learning? So, you know, do you go with the Great Teacher Toolkit? Do you go with Rosenshine's principles? Do you go with the EEF? Is there, I don't know, is this a conversation? Of course it is, that you have at SLT.
Funnily enough, Sarah, if I jump in there, I was just is the exact question and conversation that was had at a recent conference that I was at, which Nick Hart was delivering with Martin Cole, and it was exactly that, the sort of, when you're looking at CPD and how you're going to coach members of staff, what is actually going to be the thing that you're falling back on? And it was that teacher and learning framework. And the discussion was, what are you actually going to use as a school as your teaching and learning framework? And it, you know, those things were mentioned: Rosenshine's principles, the Great Teacher Toolkit, you have walkthroughs, numerous different things out there, which pretty much are the same, but worded maybe slightly different. But if you got them all together, you would be pretty much hitting the majority of what great teaching looks like, really. So we were discussing whether you go with just one of them or whether you actually end up creating a bespoke teaching and learning framework for your school. And I guess that again is where, as an international school, international through school, where ours potentially would be slightly bespoke, or could be. But then again, I always think with these things, you know, we've talked already about the fact that we we love all the sort of evidence-based approach. You've got people who are extremely well thought of in the field of education that have come up with these, the Great Teacher Toolkit, walkthroughs, etc. That would be an excellent start for, I think, any school to just pick up a framework and try and go with it. And I think that again then comes back to that when we're talking about the inspiration phase and how you go from inspiring teachers from just some sort of like spark keynote to actually go and implementing. If there is that why there, this is what a great teacher does, and then you are selecting things from there and practicing those things. The why is that you are going to be a better teacher, and then in turn, the students are going to progress. So yeah, with regards to what a great teacher and learning, teaching and learning framework looks like for each school, I think there's great ones out there. I think they all do quite similar things and say quite similar things. And a good start is to use one that is already made, and then potentially, if you wanted to, create a more bespoke one in the future. Because I think what was mentioned just earlier as well by Carol that is really important is that time factor of not time that we have as teachers, but time to implement. Sometimes I feel like we rush through these things, so you could potentially pick up a certain strategy, certain teaching and learning strategy, and think that you need to then complete that in a sort of 3 to 4 week cycle and then move on, right? What's the next thing we can do from this great teacher toolkit? Okay, now the next one. And actually you need time to properly embed it so it isn't forgotten. And some of us have been teaching 10, 20 years. We may have really bad habits that we need to be on and on doing the things that are in the toolkits to actually break those habits and form new ones.
I think you're absolutely right, Dean, and I think I agree in terms of, I don't think I agree, I know I agree that these frameworks are very similar. It's different lingo at the end of the day, but the core elements of great practice teaching and learning are almost identical from one to another. I think, as we've all said so far, it is about taking a particular framework, and whether that's one from somebody else or whether that's a bespoke one that you tweak slightly for your school setting. It's more down to not even the teaching and learning model that you are promoting and sharing and encouraging, but it's getting the staff on side to have that freedom and to have that trust and value as well, to feel empowered to go away and trial it, and not just to trial it, but also to have the confidence to admit to themselves, like myself, 14 years in the job, oh yeah, I did learn about that when I was an NQT back in the day. But, oh gosh, I can't remember the last time I actually implemented it in my classroom. And it's that refresher. It's not that we don't know how to do it, but it's that constant refresher, regardless of whether, you're a brand new member of staff, new to the profession, or, 14 years in the job or more. We're going to move on. We have mentioned coaching, and I'm not ignoring it because I know that it's a huge part and can be very successful part of CPD, but we are going to come on to that later in the show. I think that's quite a nice stage now, guys, if it's okay with you, to have another advert break. So we're going to hand over to our sponsors and friends at Teachers Talk Radio, and if you missed the discount codes, please listen again, because we've got John Catt and Bloomsbury Education in particular, if you fancy some additional reading in your spare time. So I'm going to leave it there with the adverts, and then we're going to come back after, joining Dean and Carol again, talking about overcoming this potential resistance we may get from some staff in school settings.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Future Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Perfect. Thank you so much to our sponsors and friends again. Okay, we're back into it then. Let's dive straight in. So the next section that I would like us to discuss on the show is overcoming potential resistance. Now, of course, so far we've talked very positively about CPD and all these wonderful initiatives and creating this culture of trust and value within a workplace, which of course is key to ensure this staff buy-in into the CPD and to then obviously reflect the session in the classroom, put it into practice where it's really important. But of course, we all know, having worked in schools and education, that resistance is there to CPD, whether it's time, as Carol mentioned before, or whether it's simply supporting teacher anxieties, new and more experienced staff. So I'm going to hand over to the floor. So Carol or Dean, whoever would like to answer this one first. What are the unique challenges then of implementing CPD in your school setting? And could you give us an example perhaps of resistance that you or the school may have faced from staff, and perhaps a solution for any sort of leaders out there or anybody in charge of CPD at their schools?
I'm not sure if I can give you specific examples of resistance, but I can certainly talk about overall resistance and how I would deal with it in terms of a school as a member of staff who's in charge of CPD. Some of the plans that we've had several different systems for delivering CPD. As a new developing school, we've only just got our first year 13s this academic year. And so we've had to be quite inventive with the CPD because we had to grow each year and change and develop the process depending on how many staff we have and the different aspects of the school that are developing. So it's had to be quite new each year. We've sort of trialled the overall whole school CPD and delivering in a very didactic way, and then allowing staff to go off and trial it. But that was very much at the beginning, and obviously when the school first started out, we were actually just started with COVID, so there wasn't really any other way of doing it. But after sort of 3 or 4 years, we moved to the action research project style. And I would say that was one of the most successful systems and approaches that we developed, mainly because staff could opt in and opt out of the topics that they explored, the time was clearly given to them, but they could use it as and when suited them. So they'd been given specific hours and time, but they could then use it as they wanted. So staff had more ownership of their CPD and how they were using it and developing their research. But they were also given quite a lot of support and a lot of guidance. Developing those systems of support and guidance was really crucial for that particular system, because I needed to make sure, or we needed to make sure, that staff felt they had the right level of guidance, the right level of support. So we set up sort of smaller groups of leaders for people that were really excited about the project. And those smaller groups developed their kind of understanding of the project's understanding of the ideas behind the action research. And then they took smaller groups themselves. So by delegating and creating a sort of wider model for leadership within that process, it meant that there were more options and more opportunities for support and help, and people felt that they had someone they could go to. There wasn't someone who was always busy, or someone who just said, no, this is how we're going to do it. It was much more widely developed than that, which meant that if people were resistant to it, then they had more people to talk to, more people to discuss with, them, more people involved and excited about it. And therefore their resistance was kind of overcoming that wave of investment. However, I still think that the most important thing about resistance is understanding it, because you can't overcome something that you don't understand. And there can be very many different reasons for resistance. So is the resistance because the risks are too great? I'm going to invest all of this time and then I'm not going to get anything out of it. Is it because the investment of time and energy, well, I don't understand why you want me to do this. How is it benefiting me? So understanding that resistance then allows you to address it, and it has to be addressed, I think, on an individual basis. If you've got that culture right and you've got those systems in place, then if you have any further resistance, you really need to understand the personal aspect of where it's coming from. I mean, that would be my approach to it anyway.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Carol, with the understanding the resistance and the buy-in. And actually, as you were talking, then I was thinking, we're just like the kids in our classes, really, aren't we? We need to know the why. We all know as teachers that we don't just stick a learning objective on the board, copy it down at the start of the lesson or ask the kids to, and then never mention it again. We need to know why. We need the bigger picture as well, as human beings, as professionals, just like the students in our class do. So I think you're right. If staff are on board from the word go and they understand the reasoning behind it, then it's going to be more successful. I also think another thing that you said, Carol, which I completely am a huge advocate of, is the idea of doing it in smaller groups. And that's something that Dean will, I'm sure, talk about. But in terms of the pathways at our school, over the past couple of years, this has been really quite reassuring and refreshing for class teachers, because gone are the days where a member of SLT leads every CPD session during the academic year, and it's really sort of giving the opportunity to your highly skilled classroom teachers on the floor, and perhaps middle leaders as well, to make them the ambassadors and make them the leaders or the coaches as well. And I think that creates a really different, as you said, Carol, environment and dynamic where staff feel they can have more of a voice, because the nature of the group is smaller, and because you're not being asked to sort of justify yourself to senior leaders. It's quite an informal way of doing it, but a nice community feel. So yeah, I completely agree with that, and a huge advocate of it. Dean, do you want to add anything?
I was just going to say, because with the initial question of the overcoming resistance, it would be ideal, wouldn't it, if every single member of staff was well up for spending their time after school in CPD sessions, but we know that isn't going to be the case. And I really liked how Carol mentioned that understanding the resistance of members of staff. I think there's we've probably all had the majority of our careers the same experiences with CPD, where we've sat there at the end of the day in a school hall listening to somebody who's come in, as you mentioned, then an SLT member or an external person who's come in and really is just lecturing to the staff, and we sort of walk out of there as if it's just a duty that we have to do, but never take anything from it. And I think overcoming those past experiences of CPD as we sort of evolve into a more coaching based CPD, we have to, as you said, mention that why are we doing this, and come back to the fact that our own practices should be enhanced if we are following a coaching program. One of the things that we really came up against when we first of all started implementing a sort of a peer coaching sort of system was, we thought that the best way to do that in our vast school with so many different specialisms was to mix the groupings a little bit. So it was a couple of primary school teachers with maybe a music teacher, an Arabic teacher, and a real mix of specialisms within one small hub. And that kind of straight away got people feeling that they weren't being heard, or if there was a certain strategy that we wanted to implement, how would it be best implemented in each section, and how you implement that, certain things in a music classroom is not my forte whatsoever. And I probably wasn't much help when I was trying to facilitate these hubs at all. So we sort of then moved back a little bit into those pathways where people got into groups that were, say they were doing action research on a reading curriculum. It was decided that one person was going to do that, and whoever felt like that was something that would really help their side of the school as well. So you could have junior teachers with senior teachers, but it's all based on just reading skills and whole class reading. People bought into it because they were going into groups that they actually wanted to go into, as opposed to being forced to be with other members of staff, where necessarily, not that the dynamics of the personalities were an issue, but just teaching completely different lessons. So then, being in your own year group, for instance, you can actually help one another, and you're on the same corridor as each other. So then the time issue starts to not become as much of a barrier, because when you do have a period where you're not in contact time, you can just nip into the person next door and go and sit at the back of the classroom and just observe what they're doing with the open door policy that we have. So yeah, in terms of resistance, I think a lot has to do with our past experiences that have been pretty bad, but then overcoming that through peer coaching in hubs that are with people who we work very closely with, I think is one way that we've dealt with some of the issues that we've faced.
Yeah, and obviously I've been there with you, Dean, through that, and it's one of those. It's trial and error, isn't it? I don't think perhaps Carol can correct me on this, but I don't think there's any school or any leader of CPD in a school currently that hasn't had to do a bit of trial and error there. We can't all get it right for that many staff, regardless of the size and context of your school. We're teaching and developing as professionals in an ever-changing climate, and the needs of our students and the needs of ourselves as professionals are constantly changing, and the goalposts are getting bigger and bigger, and it's one of those where we're constantly having, I think you'll agree, both of you, to rejig and to evaluate and to reevaluate to make sure that the needs of staff and students are being met. And while we're talking about this idea of trial and error and evaluating, we have had a question in from one of our listeners, so thank you very much, which I'm going to open to Carol or Dean or both. So how do you evaluate the effectiveness of CPD in a school? What have you seen as a really effective method of evaluating its success or unsuccess?
Well, I think again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I think communication is essential in the CPD process. So evaluation is about, for me, getting staff voice first and foremost, and asking staff how they feel or what they feel about the CPD is an important part of every single step. I always run it anonymously so that staff can be very, very honest. I ask them to feedback as frequently as possible after every CPD session, after each department session, after they've had the opportunity to have learning walks and observations and all the rest of those things, so that staff feel listened to and heard. Staff are also given the option to, add their names if they want further feedback, or they want further discussions, or they want other people to talk to them about what we're doing and how we're doing it. Then that open door policy that Dean mentioned earlier, I think it is the same with that. Open doors in terms of you can ask any questions. We're very transparent, and so that helps us evaluate. In terms of its impact, I think you need to be very clear at the outset, because measuring impact of CPD is incredibly difficult if you're actually looking at impact on outcomes or impact specifically to sort of results. That's much more complex than how staff feel, and that just involves being very clear at the beginning when you set out your CPD. What is it that you want to achieve? What do you expect to see? What do you want the outcomes to be? And so then you're much more able to measure the impact. So, for example, this academic year, we're going to be focusing on RSE. We really want to raise or address, student passivity and help students become more active in the classroom. So, before I even began setting out the process for that, I needed to get staff voice, I needed to get student voice, I needed to have my evidence for what I wanted this to address. And then the research and the work that I did behind, okay, how do we address these issues, and building the program means that I now know what each step of the program how I want it to impact in terms of the classroom, in terms of staff, in terms of students. So then I go back and measure that again with student voice, staff voice, and sort of learning walks and climate walks to see how and where it's being implemented. That is how I would measure it, or measure the impact of CPD. But I think it's a very complex question. It's not easy to answer that one.
And it's like you said, Carol, what are you measuring? Because they're two very different things. Are you measuring staff satisfaction in terms of their own CPD and what they've received, or are you measuring the impact in the classroom and then therefore student attainment, and that correlation to make from a CPD program to then, raising attainment is quite a difficult one to make, isn't it, as you've just said. In terms of priorities for school CPD then, now, obviously we can take the school development plans, we can look at, past inspection reports. Is there anything else your schools or your sort of experience has led you to believe in as a really effective way of prioritising exactly or choosing the areas which you think are a priority in your school for staff, other than staff voice as well, that Carol mentioned?
I would say that the CPD that we look into at our school, it is first and foremost, we look at the school improvement plan and our priorities there. And then they will be very much integrated into our CPD rotation, if you like. But then as well as that, you do have your departmental targets and also your individual targets as well, which then comes back round to one, the sort of hubs and your colleagues who you're working with, who have a great knowledge of what's going on in their departments or year groups. So you know where you want to kick on from the year before. So you can set your priorities as well based on that. But then also it comes back to the individual, and at our school where the autonomy is there to choose what pathway again that you decide to go down, which again could be very, very open as to what you believe is key for you as a individual, really, whether that be, let's say, action research or potentially even taking on professional courses. So I would say that although the majority of the CPD will be first of all aligned to whole school improvement, we do then sort of focus in on departmental, year group, and then also individual needs as well through the pathways system that we have.
Yeah, brilliant. And also, I think, Dean, the opportunity, which is much better now than it has been over the past few years, but of course due to COVID, but of TLCs and this teaching and learning idea of creating a community, whether that's within your school. I mean, I know we've mentioned subject-specific CPDs sort of happening after a whole school CPD, but actually encouraging staff and making time for staff to meet in hubs for their own subjects as well, or year teams, if we're talking about primary here, or key stage. I think that's really, really important and something that I'm seeing more and more of, particularly in the Middle East. And I'm sure, Carol, this is happening in the UK as well. But now, you know, sort of after COVID is gotten out the way, we hope that we can get back into face-to-face, you know, and looking sort of outwards and not just being so insular in our schools in terms of CPD as well. I want to move on now then to coaching. So, Dean, I think you are in a good position to start us off with coaching styles then and your experience with this.
Yes, so coaching, it seems to be the way that most schools now are delivering their CPDs through some form of coaching program. And I think going back to the barriers that we have when implementing peer coaching programs, it really, really is important that schools don't rush what their peer coaching system is going to look like. One of the things that was very prevalent when I was sort of doing my literature review in my master's topic was just this abundance of different coaching terms, reciprocal coaching, PLCs, joint practice development, instructional coaching, and so on, they completely lacked agreement in name, but also sometimes in structure as well. So there's a lot of times when a school sort of picks up a coaching program that they stick to it quite rigidly, but the idea really is that in order to, well, what I found through research was, in order to really have a positive impact and more than anything longevity, is that a school does, well, first of all, it will start on a specific program, but it does need to adapt as it goes. And that sort of comes back to what we just discussed a moment ago and what you were saying there, Sarah, where you won't get it right first time, and therefore you do need to adapt in real time as you're going along. And there then comes, again, the issue of the potential of teachers just beginning to opt out. So I think being transparent at the beginning of the implementation of a peer coaching program is really vital. And we've talked about tonight numerous times teacher voice. And I think getting a teacher voice at the beginning but also getting it as we're going along, as Carol mentioned just a moment ago, is imperative as well, and ensuring that then when you come back to the staff that you reiterate that you have listened, and this is therefore the sort of stance that we're going to take now, or the diversion that we're going to take with regards to the coaching programme itself. I mean, we're now blessed with an abundance of coaching programmes that could be looked into. So yeah, I don't think we're short of how or a programme that we can use to coach. But again, I think the same problems occur in terms of buy-in and time constraints that definitely do need to be thought about first and foremost before implementing, as well as the issues with adequate training as well of staff that are going to facilitate coaching hubs or giving feedback to other members of staff, and ensuring that all staff know exactly how your school wants that to look, really. So there's so many stages to implementing a program, really, that it is definitely a long-term system. And I think that what we sometimes do at schools, what I've seen many a time, is we implement something. If it's not going right, we then just abandon ship and start something brand new again. But as you were mentioning before, there really is, we do really need to adapt, because it does seem that peer coaching is sort of the way forward for us.
Yeah, and I think coaching as well, and you're right, you know, it's kind of the buzzword, isn't it, in terms of CPD at the moment, but it's so much more complex, as you said, from a senior leader's point of view, and whoever's in charge of the teaching and learning at that school, because, you know, you've got to make sure that your coaches are coached as well, and they've got to be singing from the same hymn sheet to a certain point. And yeah, it is a lot more complex than just, we're going to do a coaching program this year, which sounds very good from the offset. And also something I was reading, Dean, earlier, was somebody's experience of CPD in a school, not anybody that I know, but that they hit the nail on the head in terms of what you were just saying there, that CPD initiatives die due to inconsistency and commitment, don't they? And it is very easy for teachers and school leaders to lose interest. And it's like, I'm going to go back to the analogy of us being students again. It's the same thing, isn't it? You know, students will lose interest and they will be reluctant to do things and to work for you if they can't see the reason why they're doing it. And they've got to have that cliche, here we go, growth mindset, but it's the same for students and the same for staff as well when it comes to CPD, I think. Carol, I'm going to come to you for this one before we break for the news and the last part of the show. But as I said in my introduction, genuinely, you were the person for me who introduced me and my teaching and the way that I've approached my own CPD and sort of transpired that into my classroom in terms of evidence-informed practice and using, sort of research to help my classroom practice and to improve the performance and the attainment of my students. So what I have found is that, and I don't know whether you'll both agree with me, is that I've been to a lot of teacher conferences and a lot of CPD events over the past 12 months. And it is, again, sort of the buzz at the moment amongst teaching communities of evidence-informed practice and theory-led teaching and learning. But it's one thing, knowing the names and the researchers and the educators, but it's another thing then knowing how to put that into practice to ultimately increase the attainment and the progress of students. So, Carol, how do you go from informed practice and evidence-led CPD, and how do you then get that into the classroom? How do you encourage your staff to take the research and put that into good practice?
That is a very difficult question. I know.
Putting you on the spot, Carol.
I think it very much depends on the actual problem that you want to address.
Yeah.
So it always starts with the what do I want to achieve and why do I want to achieve it. The research, once I know what the problem is, once I know, I think, okay, this is an issue that I think our school needs to address. This is an issue that I think our staff or a group of staff might want to explore, because then I will look at the research available, and I will explore the options and look at the different ideas behind it. Using that research as well, what is that theory and how could it apply to my classroom, very much depends on the theory, obviously. So feedback, for example, we just take feedback as an example. There's a huge amount of theory and research that explores the concept of feedback being live. Live feedback is far more effective than written feedback. Also the concept that feedback in itself has to involve the person you're feeding back to. They have to react to it. They have to respond to it. So if that's the research, what am I going to do to get that into? How am I going to actively encourage more live feedback? How do I get staff to see that and to value that? So you share the theory with staff, or I share the theory with staff, to show them that I've not just picked an idea out of the air and just said, right, we're going to do this. I've said that this is what the research says. So based on this research, we're going to trial it, and we're going to trial it in our classroom. And this is the way I propose we trial it. At that stage, I would absolutely get staff feedback. So it's co-construction, really. What do you think about this theory? What do you think about my suggestion that this is how we should go? Oh, this is how we should develop it. Once staff have critiqued it and come back to me with their ideas, then we will agree on a process about how we're going to move forward. And that way, it means all staff think, right, this is what I've had my chance to say, I've had my chance to feedback. Yeah, I'm going to try this. And most staff at that point are more than happy to trial it and then to feedback very honestly about the impact of that. And some things have been really effective and others have been less effective. And then you change and you remodel it as you go. With the live feedback, most staff embraced it because it cut their marking load down and actually recognised that it was really, really effective. And that was one of my aims anyway. One of my aims was to staff wellbeing is crucial, and staff workload is a crucial part of CPD. And therefore, trying that live feedback and seeing how it can work and how effective it ran meant that staff were happy to get involved in it. And that was one way in which I suppose I took the theory and took it into the classroom. But that co-construction, I think, is an essential part of that. I don't think you'll get as much staff buy-in. I'm an English teacher, so whenever I look at theory, I look at it from an English teacher's perspective. I have to remember that there's a whole range of teachers in the room with a whole range of subject specialisms and priorities. So my perspective of doing something and what I've taken from that research is going to be very different from anybody else's. So sharing the research, having those steps in place, allowing staff feedback and co-construction means that it's going to be used in a much more purposeful way. So I suppose that would be how I go about it.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. And I think anytime that you mention the reduction of staff workload through CPD, you're going to get the buy-in, aren't you? So that's great. Right, I'm just conscious of time because we're having such a wonderful discussion. I could talk all night, but I'm looking now then. So we've talked a bit about, quite a lot actually, about best practices, which is great, and hopefully giving our listeners lots of different structures and different ideas for implementing really effective CPD and personalised CPD into schools and into departments as well. We're going to break now for the news and an advert break as well from our friends and sponsors at Teachers Talk Radio. And whilst we're having a pause, I just want us to have a think about the final section for tonight, which is looking ahead to the future of CPD in education. So quite a broad topic here. And we will, we'll join again in a few moments and have a look at what we think the future of CPD might look like.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Future Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News reports on the uncertainty over the future of vocational courses, with over 450 schools and colleges in England saying they are unsure which courses they can offer in 2025. The government is conducting a review of post-16 education, and the Department for Education says this will support BTEC students. But the results of the review will not be out until December. This means schools and colleges are unsure which courses they can offer students in September 2025, despite having open days scheduled in the coming weeks. 450 schools have written to the government saying that the uncertainty is making it extremely difficult to plan for the future. Not only can they not tell prospective students which courses will be on offer, they can't tell staff either. More than 200 vocational qualifications, including BTECs and other post-16 courses, were due to be scrapped under the previous government, but days before the first funding changes were due, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said there would be a pause and review. The 455 schools and colleges in England have joined the Protect Student Choice campaign, a coalition of 25 education organisations and unions. The review comes against a backdrop of issues that have plagued the rollout of T-levels, introduced 3 years ago. Ms Phillipson confirmed T-levels will continue, despite high dropout rates and issues with exam boards. Schools Week highlights the names of the 12-strong panel appointed by government to review the curriculum and assessment. It follows the appointment in July of Professor Becky Francis, the Chief Executive of the Education Endowment Foundation, to lead the review. The panel includes Academy Trust Chief Executives Cassie Buchanan and Dr Vanessa Ogden, SEND consultant Gary Orban and exams expert Professor Joanne Baird. It also includes Reach Foundation Curriculum Director John Hutchinson and Funmilola Stewart, who leads on equality, diversity and inclusion across the Dixon's Trust. Professor Francis said, "We have ensured that primary, secondary and post-16 sectors are represented," and added that alongside its call for evidence due to launch in September, the review would engage and consult with crucial stakeholder groups and work closely with education staff on the ground. Full details of the panel can be found in the article on the Schools Week website. Hundreds of students are set to miss out on Freshers Week because their accommodation will not be ready. This is according to BBC Bristol, which says Bristol University brought forward Freshers Week so students living in the new Bedminster Metalworks block will struggle to attend events as the residence will not open until the 14th of September. The university says the 819 students affected will be compensated and has offered £250 and promised extra events. But student union officers say the news leaves a sour taste. Legally binding contracts for the new accommodation mean that moving in date cannot be changed. The university brought the Freshers' Week date forward after a review of its academic year. In Wales, record numbers of pupils are being educated out of mainstream schools according to new figures. The figure of 2,279 is more than twice what it was in 2009 to 10 and 28% higher than before the pandemic. The Welsh Government said since the pandemic there had been an increasing demand for provision other than at school, including for physical health and mental health, as well as issues such as anxiety. The figures released do not include those educated outside of school due to parent choice. This has also been rising. Full details of this story can be found on BBC Wales. Finally, The Guardian reports that cleaners at a prestigious UK girls' school have won a dispute over pay and conditions. A strike that was due to take place next week has also been called off. The group of cleaners belonging to the United Voices of the World, a grassroots trade union for low-paid migrant workers, voted to strike after the school's contractor wanted to reduce their working time from 43 to 38 weeks a year, but offered only a £1.55 hourly pay rise in return. After the vote and appeals from teachers and former students, the contractor offered more pay, annual increases, and to meet the London living wage from next year. Whilst the James Allen's Girls' School, known as JAGS, declined to comment, it is understood that former pupils distributed leaflets about the strike and called on the school's leaders to set a good example to its pupils. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Another awesome job there from Jo. Thank you so much. She's amazing at the news. Thank you for that. Really, really interesting as well. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us again this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And I want to express a huge thank you to Carol and Dean again for giving up their very precious Sunday evening afternoons, particularly Carol, who has not yet started back at school. So this is actually her summer holidays still. So big shout out to Carol as well for that. Super appreciative of their input tonight. It's been so interesting. And actually just during the news as well, as I was listening, I was thinking of all the things that I haven't yet had chance to discuss with you. Maybe we need to do a follow-up show on this one as well. But we're going to move on now, if it's okay, with both of you to looking ahead to the future then of CPD. Because I think this is a really interesting topic to have a think about. You know, we all know how times change so quickly in the sphere of education. So what do we think then are perhaps going to be the key challenges and perhaps opportunities for CPD in teaching over the next few years? I think one of them is really obvious, but I'm going to hand over to my guests and let them say more about it. Carol, Dean?
I think obviously as we develop greater technology, further sort of understanding of how we can link with other people in a more easy way, building those hubs as we're doing today, you know, working with people internationally is a fantastic opportunity. And I hope that CPD develops in that way very much in the future, because we can learn so much from each other in that way. I think the challenges will be similar in that therefore then we also need greater diversity and greater understanding of the needs that are required. And I don't think time and money are ever going to change. I think both of those are going to be a challenge that we'll face, but one that you know, technology in some ways can address. You know, we have more time, we don't have to travel as far, so more time can be given. So I do think that is a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, I completely agree. And of course, the AI term is out there at the moment being thrown around left, right and centre, isn't it? And it is ultimately, you know, it's not something that just teaching will have to grapple with, but it's society, isn't it? You know, now it is part of and becoming more and more part of our everyday practice and in lots of professions as well. And so not only are teachers having to recognise the need to upskill themselves technologically, but also, as you said, Carol, the advantages of that increasingly, fantastic technology that we have now on offer is that it's allowing us to explore teaching and learning and teaching communities outside of our own hubs, of our own departments, of our own schools, which of course is only going to benefit our own professional development and the progress of our students as well. Of course it is, the teaching and learning. Dean, do you have anything different other than technology that Carol and I have spoken about in terms of looking ahead to the future of CPD and how we might need to adapt?
It's funny, the moment that you say sort of future, what does the future look like in education, I suppose, with anything, the immediate response in my brain is, how is AI going to take over CPD, or how is it going to take over whatever it is that we're talking about? And that's initially what I started to think about as the news was on then. But for me, the personal communication side of things with regards to CPD is just paramount, really. If you look at how teachers learn, probably actually the most important conversations that we've had that have really made us adapt our teaching would probably be ones maybe in a corridor or at a photocopier or in a staff room. So I don't think that AI is necessarily going to just come in the next couple of years and completely transform how CPD looks. I am kind of excited about how we can use technology, though, to help with certain barriers that we've talked about today. So, first and foremost, we mentioned that time was one of the main ones, the main barrier for CPD and coaching, and how we can actually use technology to sort of record our lessons, record ourselves teaching, which then can be shared on our shared drives. One, it's excellent for teachers to actually reflect and look back on how they actually are teaching from an outsider point of view, from watching their video back, but also it allows for peers and colleagues to give feedback to the sessions in their own time as well. So I feel like there could be a shift with regards to that when we talk about the fact that there are barriers to CPD sessions. But again, I think we're in a really great spot right now, to be honest. There's a lot of teachers who want to take control of their own CPD and their own learning in their own time, just, looking at us now even. So yeah, I think we're in a great spot where teachers are going to independently want to enhance their teaching through social media, through podcasts, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I love that at the moment. As I say, at the moment, I mean, it's been obviously developing over the past few years, but teaching has really become that, desire to share good practice, and not just share it in a classroom, but share it, as you said, Dean, on social media, through Teachers Talk, radio stations, and, all of these different platforms that we can now access to share what truly great teaching and learning looks like, and to develop ourselves professionally as well. And I just think, as you said, it's a great position to be in as a teacher. And I think it's very easy to, I was going to say pick up a newspaper, but I'm not quite sure how many people do that right now, but to switch on the news, look on your app and see all the doom and gloom, that surrounds education at the moment and has done in the past few years, and, the sort of teacher retention statistics and all of that. But I think you're right, Dean and Carol. I think, if anything, I hope with tonight's show that what we've shown as a collective is the fire is still there, and the desire and the passion for teaching and learning is there, and teachers, given the time and the right environments and the trust and all of the ingredients that you've quite rightly mentioned this evening, if we have got that environment in which we feel confident, comfortable to grow as professionals, then we can embed the CPD that's on offer to us throughout all of these platforms, and it can only be successful in our classrooms and for the progress of our students in front of us. So I'm going to have to leave it there because I'm conscious now of time and I don't want to run over, but I want to say a huge thank you, sincerely from the bottom of my heart, to Carol and Dean, who have just been even better than I thought you would have been when I was thinking about planning this show. And I just want to thank you both so much for your time and your valuable comments. And I'm going to let Carol and Dean get back to their wonderful Sunday evenings now as I just close the show. So thank you so much, Carol and Dean. And Carol, stay in touch, please. It's been too long. And Dean, I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, just to finish off then, guys, thank you again, supporters and listeners, of tuning in tonight for our really interesting Getting CPD Right on Teachers Talk Radio. I think we'll agree that successfully embedding CPD across the whole school is challenging, and it is dependent upon numerous things: change management, creating the culture, and the acknowledgement, of course, that all of us as teachers have our own unique set of values and beliefs about education. No one role model fits all, and we all know that, teaching young people every day. Have a wonderful first half term, those of you going back to school next week, and I look forward to seeing you all on Sunday the 6th of October for my monthly first Sunday of the month show next time on Teachers Talk Radio. Have a good evening, take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.